In 2018, Games Workshop released the game Blackstone Fortress, innovating on the Hero Quest formula by, well, putting it in their more successful franchise, making what was a sort of generic heroes plundering a dungeon story into a story of several miscreants plundering a space fortress for ancient relics, and introducing me to the concept of thematic basing, which has remained a permanent obsession despite my efforts in all of these hobby things. So, on the off chance that at some point in the future the official Games Workshop example for doing Blackstone Fortress bases vanishes from the internet because of tax reasons, I am creating this TikTok showing how to do it as well. Also in 2018, we were putting all our Games Workshop paints in Vallejo or Army Painter bottles, which is why when I say this starts with Ahriman Blue, I'm pulling up a recanted Ahriman Blue bottle. Oh, also, before you do any of this interesting stuff, possibly before you assemble the model, make the base flat. I usually find this is easiest to do with sandpaper. Before the model's attached, just rub them on a put a piece of sandpaper on the bottom of my bathtub and rub them back and forth. I use the bathtub because it contains all the crap that comes off. If you've got sculpted bases like this guy, follow mother's advice and use a straight edge razor to carve away the details. Ahriman Blue is actually a layer paint, and this is more base paint work, which is another frustrating detail. You're going to need a brush. It's going to need to be made into a nice thick point, and if you can't get that naturally, just make a chisel point and use sort of the edge. And then gently sort of scratch a line, which would probably be easier to do if I'd been eating something besides donuts today. Or if I hadn't been narrating this and the paint hadn't dried out. So, using the chisel brush, I've drawn these little lines. In theory, I'm going to want to make the next set of lines thinner. In practice, I'm not sure that matters too much. But the lines are little and I've drawn them, so rather than torture myself and you by trying to show you what happens exactly, I'm going to mix Thousand Suns Blue base with Lamia Medium to make a glaze. Yes, I'm now using base paints the way you'd use layers to sort of draw shadows coming off of some of these lines. So let's do just one of these on camera, and then I'll do the rest from a much more orthopedically comfortable pose. And it's just trying to maybe half or 2/3 of the edge with a sort of thick, bubbly glaze to give the impression that this is just glowing out from under these cracks. The later stages will have much different color, so the contrast becomes much more dramatic. I feel like the game Blackstone Fortress was a bit of a disappointment given how the traditional Warhammer type of rules manifested as an experience with a lot of bookkeeping. I think something with a more abstract rule set towards combat and heavens to Betsy, a more abstract take on puzzles would have had a much more satisfying playthrough. Anyway, I've done the little bits of gloss and gently blasted it with a hairdryer for the sake of cinematography, and you can sort of see the slightly glowing effect going on. So the next step is to reinforce the lines with Baharath Blue, a very pale blue. This, I think, was introduced as an edge paint before being moved back to the layer range. As you should be able to see, the lines are starting to take shape, and the lighter blue on top of the original darker blue gives a definite... it makes everything just look better. I can't quite get thinner lines than what I've already got. So I'm painting a little bit to the side so that it looks like the original line is just sort of peeking out from underneath the second line. And the method of getting the brush is to just swing it back and forth, moving it slightly closer and closer until it finally impacts with the surface and scratches the thing in. So straight up pushing the brush onto the surface, it took me a while to work out, is a bad idea. No matter how thin the brush is, when you push it onto the surface, it's going to spread out. But if you can just sort of scratch it, you can still maintain control and really thin lines. Another frustrating aspect of Blackstone Fortress that I think would have been very easy to fix was that the number of little cardboard tiles you had was quite large, and assembling the battlefield, the encounter, was always a stressful exercise. Everyone had a tile and wanted to know where it would go. Everyone around the table has a tile and wants to know where it goes. And no matter how many times you tell them that's not the tile, or the tile goes there because you've been looking at the tiles more than them, it always just leads to... Look, the correct solution, I think, would have been to use one or two, maybe two or three boards the size of Underworld's, and then layer the much smaller tiles on top of those in specific places to build a variety of encounters. So obviously, I've been prototyping that with printer paper and have done absolutely nothing with it. Luckily, there is only this one little crack here left to do. Is this a focus lock? No, that's an exposure lock. Is this a focus lock? Maybe. No. Anyway. So the final step with colors is to really hit those places where the lines intersect to give them this screaming bright effect, like they're cracks in some eldritch surface with light or energy peeking through. I'm using Pro Acryl's Bold Titanium White because it's more pleasant to work with than other whites, and quite frankly, I don't know where my other whites are. Realistically, any white, any clean white, any pure white should be good for this. This is one of those times when it should be perfectly fine to use a pure white, since you're not painting a surface that's white, you're highlighting some other feature to make it stand out a little bit more as white. It's a theoretical thing. And I am doing a pig's ear of this, but I'm hoping it won't matter nearly as much as how disgusting that nurgling looks. So I'm doing the little dots, but they're coming out as little blobs, and I want them to come out like little tiny fractures into this deeper crack. The one place I have left is here. I think I can fight through the effect of so many donuts and hold the thing normal. Awesome. So the last step is to use a gloss varnish. Again, like the white, anyone should be fine, to try and tie the whole thing together, hiding the lumps by amusingly making everything more shiny. To do this, I'm using my venerable chisel brush that has seen better days, and I've blown this with a hairdryer a little bit to try and prevent the paint from getting knocked loose. In theory, usually I would also varnish the edge. Or usually I would only varnish the edge with a gloss varnish, since I just don't usually like how glossy surfaces look. Personal preference. But in this case, once the gloss varnish is dry, I will return and just do a thick coat of black around the edge and leave it as is to make it distinct from the gloss surface that this varnish will create. So there it is. While the varnish is still dry, you can see it looks absolutely terrible and cloudy. And here it is again with the varnish hairbrushed, hair dryered. I don't think it's quite up to the heavy metal Golden Demon quality. And to be honest, these clouds are much more obvious on the camera than they are when I look at them in real life. But it's what I was going for. It's what I wanted. It's what I was after. The official instructions say to mix the varnish with Lamia medium to produce a satiny finish rather than this glossy finish. I, in this case, don't want to. I kind of prefer the glossy. The official instructions also have you using astrogranite debris to fill in gaps and holes in the base and generally decorate it. In this case, I shuffled through the shelves at Games Workshop because some of their 32mm bases are completely flat and don't need that. If you don't have astrogranite debris and you do have holes that you want to fix with it, well, just do that and then paint it with Meccana Standard Gray, which has settled here, but trust me, looks pretty much identical once it's wet. Once it's shaken, or any real color. And you can reproduce the bits of gray rubble of the destroyed alien fortress on the base of this Chaos Warrior who is defending the fortress. This guy isn't actually a Blackstone fortress model, nor is he part of the, what are they called? No Respite? I think it's called the No Respite expansion, where Nurgle's Chosen are interceding in the fortress. No, this guy is just a Space Marine Heroes model, and my intent was to expand the forces available to the Blackstone Fortress while also suggesting that the heroes should be working in little groups and the rule system should be improved. But for the time being, I'm just doing all of my chaos stuff with these little Blackstone Fortress bases, and you don't need to hear any more from me. There's nothing else to say.